everyone. So I've had a little bit of a chance today to do a vlog about vibrato. Vibrato is one of those questions that I get a lot about, how to do vibrato. Not only from my students, but I get emails. I get emails through my YouTube channel. I get emails through Facebook, and everybody has questions about vibrato. And there's really not one answer to say how do you do vibrato. Vibrato is something that takes time, and it's not something that you acquire right away. I always compare vibrato to a good bottle of red wine. You have young wine, and then you have older wine, and it needs to sit. It needs time to really develop a full flavor. And vibrato is the same way. Vibrato is something that you can learn the basics or the whole fundamental idea about how to do vibrato, but then as you grow with the violin, as you grow with the instrument, vibrato becomes more mature and develops with time. So even if you learn vibrato today and you finally know how to do vibrato, the trained ear can listen to the changes, the difference between a young vibrato and someone who's been playing the violin for a while and has developed a certain quality to their vibrato. So vibrato is a very interesting topic, and there's many ways to approach it and different ways to teach it. I find it interesting when I see students or other teachers who say, well, vibrato comes from the wrist or vibrato comes from the elbow, and I personally don't like teaching it that way. Vibrato, I believe, is a combination of things that have to come together in order to develop that vibrato. Fundamentally, to me, I believe vibrato comes from not just your wrist and your hand and your fingers and the joints in your fingers, but also the elbow. There's got to be a combination of things. You can't have a stiff elbow and have a proper vibrato. It's just there's something about it. You can hear the differences too. The other thing about vibrato is that there are different combinations of vibrato. I believe there are 4 combinations of vibrato. That's the way I was taught, and I've examined that, I've studied that, and I believe there's 4 combinations of vibrato. Speed being one of the factors in vibrato, and then the wobble, the wider or narrower. So speed for fast and slow vibrato, and the wobble, the wider or narrow sound of vibrato. So different combinations that you have with vibrato. So as I said, there's 4 combinations of vibrato, and that is a combination of speed and wobble. So with speed, again, you have fast and slow. With wobble, you have wider or narrower. And then when you mix those combinations, you have different vibratos, which is another thing that I believe is very important, is that if you're a professional violinist or you're studying to be a professional violinist, you need to be able to develop more than one style of vibrato. You cannot play a slow piece, for example, with a fast vibrato. It gets that nervous sound to it. So you got to develop at least a good solid 2 styles of vibrato that are going to be used, when you play something slower and more emotional or romantic piece, something like that, and a faster vibrato that is going to accommodate for something that you're playing that's faster. You can't have a slow vibrato on a fast piece. It just doesn't make sense. Okay, so optimally you should have you need to develop at least 2. I don't like to narrow my students to just 2 basic types of vibrato. I actually like to teach them a little bit more than just So that's something that you can spend a lot of time as a teacher. You can spend a lot of time with a student, months, even years to develop good vibratos. So when you start thinking about the combinations that I feel exist in a vibrato and that I was taught is that you have four combinations: fast and wide, fast and wide, fast and narrow, slow and wide, slow and narrow. Those are the four combinations. So fast and wide, fast and narrow, slow and wide, slow and narrow. Those are the four ways of doing vibrato, vibrating the sound. Variety is important in music making, and so those are the four combinations that I think any student should strive for and spend time working on. Now, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not something that you're going to learn in a month, perhaps. Some people, it clicks quicker than others. The other thing is with adult students. I find for adult students, it always takes a little bit longer, and that's normal. I mean, you can see little kids; they're very flexible. They're, and they can do it sometimes very quickly, sometimes not. But adult students, especially if you're an adult student, and I do have a lot of adult students, I love teaching adult students, it can take a little bit more, because as adults, and especially if you're just taking the violin, picking up the violin and learning for the first time, we're adults. We're not as flexible. It takes a little bit more work. But the nice thing with adult students is they tend to be able to understand better what's going on and what you have to do to accomplish a decent vibrato, and they can understand the four combinations of vibrato. So with that said, with the four combinations, I encourage my students not to think of vibrato as something that's coming from the wrist or something that's coming from the fingers. It's got to be a combination. In my opinion, it has to be a combination of things that are happening with your left arm and with your hand and your fingers, the flexibility of the joints of the finger. A lot of the students the adult students have a little bit of a hard time with the concept of holding a note down and then having the flexibility in the joints to develop, to bring out this vibrato, because your joints in your finger need to be flexible. Your hand needs to be flexible. You can't be squeezing the neck of the violin to bring out the vibrato. It's not going to happen. It's okay, but you can't have a stiff elbow either. You cannot have a stiff wrist. Everything's got to flow. There's a flow to things. Remember, vibrato is an action that's coming away from you and towards you. This movement. Okay, a lot of people are doing this for vibrato, or up and down on the string. That's not vibrato. Up and down on the string is not vibrato. Sideways is not vibrato. Vibrato is an action that happens, that is away from you to you, away from you to you. Okay, so there's a lot of time that can be spent teaching vibrato or learning vibrato. There's a lot of exercises you can do. I love scales. I love scales for learning different techniques. I think scales are fundamental when you're learning an instrument, especially something like the violin. And to me, a scale is perfect to develop vibrato. That's the reason why when I teach vibrato to my students, they're doing scales. They're incorporating. They're doing different exercises with a scale. Not only playing, long détaché bows, but they're also doing other combinations and things with the scale, and then also using the scale to practice vibrato and to develop vibrato. Another thing to keep in mind, and again, this is not meant to be teach you how to do vibrato. You need a teacher. Okay, you can have opinions and you can take opinions and see what works for you, but you definitely need a teacher that can show you step by step how to do it. The other thing is, when you're practicing vibrato, keep in mind that doing vibrato with the first finger and the fourth finger, those are the hardest fingers to do vibrato. That's why many times as violinists, if we have to do a long vibrato on some note, we'll shift into a position that we can use the second finger or a third. If not, then you do it with the first or a fourth, depending on what you're playing, where you're playing it, and all of that. But first finger is a very stiff finger, so that takes a little bit more, you know, of molding and of developing. And the fourth finger is a very weak finger. So if you have a lot of weakness in your fourth finger, vibrato in your fourth finger is going to need a little bit more time and more work and a little bit more developing. So those are things to keep in mind. But again, get a teacher, get a good teacher, and just remember 4 combinations and just work slowly. Work slowly. You know, it's something that don't expect it to happen overnight. It's not going to happen. It takes time, it takes dedication, practice, and eventually it'll come. But I tell you this, once it clicks and once you get the idea and you finally get it, then you got it. And then it's just a matter of perfecting it, of letting it season, if you will, and then you'll get it. Okay? So remember, 4 combinations of vibrato that has to do with speed and wobble. Speed for fast and slow, wobble for wider or narrower, and then you have the combinations. And the combinations are fast and wide, fast and narrow, slow and wide, slow and narrow. Okay, I hope this helps you in some way, and just keep sending your messages. You can email them to me, you can put them on Facebook, you can put them on YouTube. And I'm going to try to get a little bit more time to answer your questions. I get tons of emails and Facebook messages about different aspects of playing the violin. That's one of the things I want to do a little bit more for you guys, is to spend a little bit of more time and just, you know, give you, pass on a little bit of the knowledge that I have, and hopefully that can make life a little bit easier for you. Okay? Stay in touch. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, have a good day.